welcome to this tutorial which is going to show you how to carry and crochet around the yarn when we're crocheting these gingham checked Tunisian Entrelac squares, and by doing that we're going to significantly reduce the amount of ends that need weaving in. I've done a separate video tutorial to show the whole technique of Tunisian Entrelac and specifically to create this gingham effect. This one is just to focus on crocheting around the ends. My name's Eleonora, I'm the designer behind Coastal Crochet, and I hope you find the tutorial helpful. There's a few things to consider first which I will go through now. So these gingham checked Tunisian Entrelac squares are made in diagonal rows. And previously on the colour change rows where we're going from red to white to red, red, white, I've cut the yarns and then weaved in the ends. So after making the red square and changing to the white yarn, I then weave in the ends into the red square. And equally after crocheting the white square and then changing to red, I weave the white ends into the back of this square. And that produces a really neat finish. I'll show you how I have done that previously. Tunisian crochet produces a very thick and dense fabric, so it's perfect for weaving in ends. And this is how I have done it traditionally. Get your yarn and just weave through the back like so. And if you look to the front, you can't even see the needle because the fabric is so dense that the end is really neatly woven into the back. And when weaving in ends, it's always good to go a lot of different ways. Don't just weave in one direction. Go a different way. Again, you can see at the front, you can't even see the needle. Pull through. And then I go one more time. It's such a lovely, thick, dense backing that you really don't see the ends at all at the front. Pull through. And then we simply snip the end like so. And looking at the front, you can't see any of the end, and the end is neatly woven in. So that's how I've done it traditionally, and as you can see, this is the back. It's pretty neat, really neat at the front, and that's okay. The only negative of this technique is, and as we've discovered during my picnic on the beach blanket crochet along, the details of that are on my website, is that there are a lot of ends. And after finishing a small square like this, you'll have ends for each of these individual red and white squares. So a lot of ends to weave in, which obviously is not the fun part of crochet and something that we would like to minimise if possible. And so that is what I'm going to show you now. Just want to show you the back. So this is where I've weaved in the ends individually. And this square here is where I've carried the yarn, and that's what this tutorial is going to show you. As you can see, it's not quite as neat at the back, so here you can see where I'm carrying some of the red yarn, and equally around this square you can see where I'm carrying some of the white yarn. So it's not as neat, but still pretty satisfactory. And of course this is the back of the work. When you're looking at the front of the work, there's absolutely no difference at all. And both techniques produce a very neat front finish. It's literally just about the back and whether you want ends or not. And if you really can't stand weaving in all those ends, then this is a great technique. I'll show you how to do it. So here you can see I'm on my third diagonal row. I've just done this red square here, and I'm at the point of my first colour change, ready to crochet a white square. So insert your hook into the adjacent square we're joining to, and now we're going to join with the white yarn, but make sure the red yarn sits over the hook like so before we join with the white, like so. And by doing that, the red is going over the white yarn. And so what we're going to be doing is, as we make this white square, we're going to be crocheting around the red yarn, going along the top on our first row of the white square, and then we're going to carry it up the side of each of the rows of the white square. So when we get to the point here where we're going to make our next red square, we're using the same yarn, and therefore we won't have the ends to weave in. And to crochet around the red yarn and carry it along, what we're going to be doing is, as we're picking up the loops and inserting our hook behind these vertical bars, we're going to alternate by making sure that our crochet hook goes over the red yarn and then under the red yarn for the next loop, over the red yarn for the next loop we're picking up, under the red yarn for the next one. And by alternating doing that, we're going to be trapping the red yarn and carrying it along. So I'll show you what I mean. Insert your hook behind the first vertical bar like so. And with this first one, we're going to pick up the loops, the yarn over, pull through. Make sure your hook is going over the red yarn. So it's going over the red yarn like so. Yarn over, pick up that loop as normal. But you can see already we've trapped in the red yarn there like so. The next vertical bar, insert your hook behind. And this time we're going to be making sure that our crochet hook goes under the red yarn before we do yarn over hook and pull up a loop like so. And again you can see it's trapped the red yarn. The next vertical bar, we're now going to make sure our crochet hook goes over the red yarn. And in the final vertical bar, we're going to make sure our crochet hook goes under the red yarn before we pull up a loop like so. So we've nearly completed our first row. If you look behind, you can give the red yarn a little tug, not too tight because you don't want to make it too tight, but you can see it's trapped behind the white like so. And in this final one, we insert the hook, and this time making sure that the crochet hook goes over the red yarn before we pull up that white loop. And now we just complete the return pass as normal. And here's the end of that first row. You can give the red yarn a little tug and you can see it's been captured and trapped behind the white yarn on that first row, and you can barely see it to the front at all, and as we do the second row you won't be able to see it at all. So that's how we've carried it across the top. The red yarn is now here and we need to carry that up the side of the work, ready for it to be here for our next square. So as we crochet into the sides of this row, we'll be crocheting around that red yarn, and I'll show you what I mean. So here I've nearly completed the forward pass of the second row. Insert your hook into the adjacent row of the square we're joining to, and make sure that the yarn just goes over the crochet hook so that as you pull the yarn through, that red yarn is trapped into the work. And then complete your return pass as normal, like so. There's 2 more rows to do before we get to our bind off. Here's row 3. And again, we're nearly at the end of the forward pass of row 3. Insert your hook into the side, making sure your hook is going under that strand of red yarn and trapping it in like so. 1 more row. And here's the final row. Insert your hook, making sure that the red yarn is going over the hook, and then complete the return pass as normal. So we've just got the bind off to do now. If we turn the work and have a look, you can see the red yarn now is trapped there, going on top of that square, and then it's going up the side. And we can give it a little tug to neaten it, not too tight. We don't want to ruck the work up, but you can see there the yarn is carried. We're going to do our bind off, and then this red yarn is in the right position for us to rejoin it, ready to do a red square up here. So just complete the bind off row. And so there's the final of the bind off rows. Give the red a tug. And now at this point we are going to insert our hook into the top of the adjacent square. Make sure the white yarn is going over the hook, and now the red yarn is in the correct position to join it. Like so. And so now we have the red yarn joined, ready to make the next square. And if we look behind, you can now see that the red yarn has been carried behind the work pretty neatly. It's red yarn behind a white, so there's always going to be some show through, but I think that's pretty neat. And so now we have one red square to do on this third diagonal row. So I will show you how to just carry the yarn again. We don't necessarily need to at this point because this white yarn doesn't need to be carried. But if we were doing a longer diagonal row, you would now be crocheting around the white, ready for that to be joined later. So I'll just show you again one more time how to do it. So insert your hook behind that first vertical bar, and on this first one make sure your hook is going over the yarn that we're carrying. On the next one make sure it's going under the yarn that we're carrying. On the next one make sure it's going over the yarn that we're carrying, and on the next one make sure it's going under the yarn that we're carrying. And as you can see, give it a little tug, not too tight, but you can see there that the white yarn is being trapped neatly behind the red, like so. And so I hope that gives some idea of how to carry those yarns, and it certainly eliminates the need for all those ends. So yeah, a really great, helpful technique to learn. Hope you found the tutorial helpful. Thanks for watching.